Sorry, can you just give me a clap? Thank you.
Clap for the Wolfman. He gonna take your record high. My name is Paul Chek. I am a holistic health practitioner, and I'm a medicine man and spirit guide through the Native American Council. So our concept of aging is really mirroring back our social belief systems, and a lot of the stress that drives those social belief systems come from dogmatic religious ideology and hell and damnation and God that will punish you in hell. So a lot of people at the core are afraid to die because they're afraid to meet God because they think they've been sinners all their lives. And so what they're doing is they're trying to avoid death, but simultaneously they're avoiding life too. So, healthy aging really turns out to be, from a shaman's perspective, about singing, dancing, enjoying stories, enjoying being alone with yourself, and celebrating the magic, mystery, and awe of life. And guess what? When you do all that, you are not afraid to die. Rumi says, you are not a drop of the ocean. You are the ocean in a drop. And when you realize that, dying is just going back to the source of what you really are, which is unconditional love. And so if you live fully and love fully, then your life is a process of making more and more love, and you reach a state of awareness in which you know that love is the basis for life itself. And when your body dies, you just expand in love. But we've got a culture that thinks that when it dies, it's either going to meet a God that'll burn it in hell, or it's screened to black. And having studied extensively belief systems around death from cultures around the world, we're one of the few cultures that has such a chokehold belief about death. And it's also a very shallow way to look at life. It's totally a scientific, materialistic perspective. But, I can summarize it this way. What we call birth and death are two halves of a circle. And for anything to be in form, such as your body, it has to be first conceived of. And we conceive of ourselves as an expression of the mind of God, or the mind of the universe, if you will. And we enter into that creative impulse and express ourselves as a human being, or the animals are the expression of the earth and the universe and the solar system. My point is that if you really meditate on what death is and what life is, life and death are like two sides of a coin. One has to exist for the other to exist. And when you live fully, then you know that your passing away is making room for someone else to have an opportunity in the garden, and that you carry that consciousness in, and it becomes part of the pool of the intelligence of the wisdom of the universe itself. And that's what evolution is. Paradoxically, God cannot know God's potential until God actually lives and experiences the polarities which produce consciousness, or God can't be aware of what God is. And we are all that. When people used to ask St. Francis of Assisi all the time, how do I find God? He said, what you are looking for is what's looking. But if you believe God is some old guy in the sky with a bad attitude who uses this guy called the devil to make your life miserable, then you're going to drug the hell out of yourself as you approach aging, because to face the death process consciously is too scary. But when you live and love fully, and you dance and you sing and you enjoy stories, and you spend enough time inside yourself to find the whole universe, and you worship the magic and mystery and awe of life, then dying is exciting. In fact, I think there's a Filipino culture that celebrates death, and when they turn 50, one of their big exciting things is that they get to go have their costume custom built and fitted for them, and they often lay in it each day because they're excited to get to enter behind the curtain and see what the new world has for them. So you see a lot of most everything we're talking about boils down to belief systems, and belief systems are what inspire behaviors. So at the end of the day, aging gracefully has everything to do with belief systems. And if your belief system's producing bondage, a lack of freedom, confinement, and illness, it's time to get outside of the box. And who is here to help us do that? The children. So what happens if a person's mindset gets rigid, they don't flow forward with evolution. And evolution is ceaseless. It's the arrow of life itself. So what you see if you look at Dr. Daniel Siegel's model of the mind, he uses an analogy of a river. He says, mind is like a river. One bank is called rigidity, the other bank is called chaos. And to be a healthy person, you need to keep your boat going down the middle of the river. So, you know, when you look at someone like George Burns, who was a comedian and, you know, drank and smoked cigars till he died. I think he lived to be 100 and something years of age. He had a good sense of humor. He was, even when he was a very old man, he was very engaging and he smiled a lot and he had a lot of child in him, you know. So I think the secret is to not lose playfulness. One of the most common things that I see happening to people is that they get so logical and rational that the relative balance of the unrational and the rational gets very, very tainted toward the rational. But, you know, half of life is irrational, you know, and a good example of that is, what is rational about love? So when we rationalize love, it leads to us having expectations of others. We expect our children to grow up to be just how we want them to be and to do exactly what we want them to be. And we have rational expectations of ourselves, which as you're aging can be very dangerous because you can say, oh, I'm 60, so I'm too old to climb that mountain, or I'm too old to get in a kayak or a canoe or any number of things, right? But the reality of it is that love and passion and humor have no age boundaries. So if a person worships the unrational, the spontaneous, the playfulness, most all cultures worshiped life. They worshiped nature. They worshiped the children because they knew the children were their future. They knew nature is their future. They knew life is their future. Without children, without life, and without nature, you have nothing, right? We couldn't even be having this discussion without them because we were both children, we're both alive, and we both live from the products of nature and in an environment that we call nature. And even a city is stuck in the middle of nature somewhere. It just creates a false environment, but it puts a tremendous stress on nature. So when we practice worship, we honor the chain of being from the microorganisms in the soil, which turn out to be the microorganisms in our gut, to the weather patterns, to worshiping, you know, a country like Australia that's had a long drought gets close to realizing why the natives worship water, right? So we look at the elements, the earth. If you ruin it, you're dead. Water, if you poison it, you're dead, and so is nature. The air, if you poison it, you're dead. You're breathing it all day. Warmth and metabolism, which is the sun. We eat the sun through photosynthesis, and even when we eat an animal, most of them ate plants. Everything depends on the warmth of the sun. And if you throw those elemental relationships out of balance, then what happens is you start producing a huge population of sick children, which we now have. And you also see the same rapid aging in adults. And we, you know, Ehrenfried Pfeiffer, who was considered the first biochemist and who studied directly with Rudolf Steiner, did extensive tests. And in 1957, in a lecture in the Texas Women's University, said that based on something like over 3,500 tests of liver detoxification capacity, he said the average person's liver by the age they were 35 was performing at the level of a 75-year-old. He said most people are dead by the time they're 35 and their bodies just keep walking for another 35 years. Well, where is all that toxicity coming from? It's coming from how we're managing the very things that our ancestors worshipped. They would not poison the water. They would not poison the sky. They knew where they came from. So to worship is to honor, love, appreciate, and respect that which gives you life, gives you embodiment, and gives you the ability to express yourself. How would life be different without trees? Well, we're about to find out. Steiner said there's two things human life depends on, and when they reach a critical level, your life will end as you know it. They are bees and trees, and they're both right now right on the edge of going out of existence. So the point being is that if you worship, I begin my day every day with a half an hour roughly of giving thanks through prayers to the earth, to the water, to the fire, to the air, even to the six directions, north, south, east, west, above and below. Those are the coordinates within which we have an experience. Without those coordinates, we don't have any experience. And each of them is a direction of energy flow and a unique quality of energy. And anyone that finds that confusing, all you got to do is get on an airplane and just keep flying north. And when you get out, it'll be very cold. Fly south. When you get out, people have hardly any clothes on and it'll be very warm. Fly west, you'll get to Hollywood. Fly east, you'll end up in the Himalayan mountains with a bunch of yogis. Why? Because the energies are expressions of consciousness and they produce a different flowering of consciousness. So worshiping the earth, worshiping the elements, worshiping the energies of the directions which are expressions of consciousness, worshiping the plants, worshiping our ancestors, which is very deeply rooted in the Chinese culture. You see, in the Chinese culture, they worship the ancestors, but in the Western culture, old people are a pain in the ass and you want them off the road and you want them off the job and you want to segregate them in old folks' homes where nobody has to talk to them or deal with them. And so aging there is very, very sad and very, very isolated and filled with drugs and a loss of consciousness, and their bodies are used to just for profit generation, and that all is supported by our government. Well, what do you think is going to happen when those very people are the grandparents of the children that will be tomorrow's politicians and tomorrow's leaders and tomorrow's movers and shakers? Well, Einstein said if you want to solve a problem, you can't use the same thinking that created it. And it's the child that comes along and teaches us how to see and perceive in ways that the rigidified mind cannot see.
Hey, I'm Kale. I've spent the last 10 years researching health and well-being, and I think I've got it pretty figured out. I'm travelling to visit the world's healthiest people. These tiny communities have the longest lifespans of any culture on Earth.
Welcome to Ikaria.
This is Okinawa, Japan. They're happier, have less disease, and an incredible quality of life. And I've come here to learn their secrets.
Stop the trumpet. It's enough.
In the West, we are aging terribly. For the first time in history, the average kid born today can expect to live a sicker life and die younger than their parents.
There is a bit of a gauntlet that we need to cross of our comfort zone.
I want to experience the culture for what it is, but when a lot of it clashes with what you believe, it's hard.
Green smoothies, yoga, that fanatical approach to wellness is probably going to shorten your life.
Social isolation and withdrawal are worse for us than smoking, obesity, and substance abuse.
They're just doing life, and they're doing life well.
You need to act young, and that's what these guys are doing. They're 20 years younger in those moments. 10 in the morning and the wine tastes like it's been spiked with vodka. Better start dancing soon, I hope.